You know, they always say, there are no strangers, only friends that we have yet to meet. So you have all met already. So you're all friends now. So give yourself a big round of applause, everybody. Thank you so much for being such a great crowd in participating in that exercise. Now, good afternoon, everybody, and warm welcome. We appreciate you taking time off to be here to join us today at Singapore, the FinTech Nation book launch. We are also very honored by the former Minister for the Information, Communications and the Arts, Dr. Yaakob Ibrahim, for sending us his congratulatory message through our virtual live streaming.
Hi, let me begin by congratulating the two authors, Lilian and Varun, for a job well done. This book, The FinTech Nation, documents our journey in this very important effort to bring where we are today. I think this effort is important for us to also place on record the people who have made immense contribution to help Singapore capture the imagination of the entire community in terms of our FinTech innovations and development. So I congratulate both authors. I congratulate all the people who made it possible, and I hope we can continue to keep Singapore's flag flying in our endeavor to become a FinTech hub. Congratulations to all and enjoy the book. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so with that, it's time to launch the book. And of course, it gives me great pleasure to invite up on stage the following. We'd like to invite the authors. All right, could we have Mr. Varun Mittal and Dr. Lilian Koh? The book is here. Dr. Koh, one book for you as well. Take one book. Oh, you have yours, okay? And they will also be accompanied by Dr. Dennis Koo and Mr. Shadab Tayabi. Thank you, sir. All right, so at this point, we will have Dr. Koh. She will be moderating the panel for this afternoon. As you all know, Dr. Koh is a live wire, trailblazer, fire starter. She does lots of stuff, as you all will know. And I will leave it to her to introduce her panel. And so if you're ready, you want me to do it? Okay, I will do it then. I thought, Dr. Koh had some secrets to share with us about her panel. All right, so I'll start off. First on stage, we got Mr. Varun Mittal, co-author of the book and global EM FinTech leader at EY. Now, aside from advising financial services providers in the ASEAN region, he has also assisted in the development of FinTech Hub ecosystems across ASEAN, India, Middle East, European Union, and Latin America. So that is Mr. Varun Mittal. Next to him, on his left, we got Dr. Dennis Koo, one of the pioneers in fintech industry, having built digital banks and digital banking in ASEAN, an accomplished senior banker and speaker in innovation and leadership. His sought-after views provide a unique vantage point in crafting and executing a banking strategy for a digital world. Dr. Dennis Koo. Up next, we have Mr. Shadab Tayabi, a seasoned professional and business leader. He is head of strategic partnerships Southeast Asia. He is also head of community at the FinTech Nation. Welcome, sir. And last but not least, the founder of FinTech Academy, director of research, Curtin University, Singapore, and currently advisor to the Institute of Blockchain, Singapore. Please welcome the one and only Dr. Lilian Koh, as well as our gracious moderator for this afternoon's panel. Dr. Koh, take it away.
Thank you, thank you. And I really want to thank each and every one of you for joining us at this iconic event, I call it. And I really am so grateful to have wonderful people like Varun, wonderful people like all of you here, as well as those of you who are watching us from wherever you are. That's the magic of digitalization and technology. And today, we are so fortunate to be able to gather here so that we can examine how Singapore evolved to be what it is today. Varun and I were there to see right from the beginning how this ecosystem was trying so hard to form. And that ecosystem, the relentless individuals, and our very supportive regulators were there for us right from the beginning. So if we don't capture a story like that, it's going to be going to waste. So when Varun said, let's have this book, I said, but of course. And here we are having this wonderful book that is our gift to the nation. So join me in reading the insights of the many, many trailblazers, founders, as well as our big boys, the incumbents. What type of experience did they go through right from the beginning? How has it evolved? And how do we become the FinTech Nation today? It is a title that we have laid claim on, but it's the next generation that you've got to hold it, hold the dream. All right? So without further ado, we are going to start this panel, but I think we should hear it from my partner in crime. Over to you, Varun.
Thank you so much, Prof. So the actual journey of this started a bit last year. I was in Israel, and everybody was calling it the Startup Nation. And we started to see, like, why is it called Startup Nation? And we figured out that there were actually two people who wrote that journey and story. And that became the calling for rest of the country to rally behind it, to make it even further when they were at the time of writing of that book. So when I came back, I said, what made Israel successful and what makes Singapore successful? And the preface of the whole mandate is, they have something what they call as chutzpah, which makes them fearless. We have kiasu. So we are scared of failure. We are scared of losing out. And our fear is our strength when it comes to a regulated industry. So in non-regulated industry, being fearless is great. But in a regulated industry, be cautious of the boundaries, and to work and push this limit inside the rules is what makes us different. And I started to put that together, talk to MAS, ask them about their feedback about, will this be, what do they think? They said, and being MAS, says, it's a very good idea, do it. I'm like, what does that mean? He says, yeah, you told about us the book. It's a very good idea, you should do it. I'm like, shit, what did I sign up for? And thanks to Eddie, he was the one who first time introduced me to Prof. And I reached out to Prof that I can't do it alone. This is too big of an undertaking. I'm scared. And she's like, okay, I have done a few of these. I'll help you. Let's work together. And that's how, and imagine, when we started, we didn't even meet. It was only on WhatsApp calls in the middle of COVID that we aligned that we are going to do this, and we started. And for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the book, we didn't even meet each other face to face. That's how this is, I would say, a COVID child in that perspective, on how it was incubated and how it has, now that the vaccine is there, the book launch happens right after the vaccine is come in. So that's how this journey of this book was there.
Thanks, Varun. And I think this journey is really, really something so memorable, and it's so meaningful because we gather everyone together. So now we are very pleased to have this panel. And to my right is Dr. Dennis Khoo. I have been such a pest, and I go like, Dennis, do tell us what you think of digitalization, technology, and everything else that is going to break new frontiers. So Dennis, over to you.
Well, first, congratulations, Lillian and Varun, on the book. I think it's a very good documentation of the journey that Singapore has gone through. You know, Singapore is a very small nation, even in terms of the market, right? As a startup, you have to go global almost immediately. And having the whole journey and story in terms of how Singapore came about to, I think that for me, the most impressive thing is the whole, bringing together the whole support system, the legislative and, governance frameworks, the money, and seeding all this together so that it create a possibility for all this new innovation and fintech to happen. So I think that that is the amazing thing, and this is a very good documentation of that journey and how it happened. So I think for me, and giving more of a banker's view on this, right? On the B2B side, FinTech is a new word for software. From a bank perspective, most banks, except probably the largest banks in the world, right, like Citi or HSBC, they can afford to write their own software. But I'm not a big believer that banks are software houses with licenses, because frankly, having worked in a few banks and having talked to a lot of people in banking and senior bankers, we are not software houses. We write software primarily for one captive audience. So my belief has always been that I think there are at least, and this number is dated, 5,000 companies around the world just focus on FinTech alone. And therefore, if you create the environment where they can partner with you, then I think you can always probably find more innovation, especially if you are a bank that is big in one country, or you are a bank that is in several countries. But most banks don't go beyond that, right? There are very few cities and HSB. And in fact, there won't be any more, in my view, global banks. Because the rationale for forming a global bank was always capital. In the days when I joined banking, capital was freely mobile. You didn't need to incorporate a bank. So you could have a main mother company in the UK, in the US, and then you have branches all over the world, and then you move capital around. And after the financial crisis, of course, that was completely stopped. Because when you do that and there is a crisis, where is the money that you're going to use to pay back the depositors? So after that, the regulators require you to incorporate. So therefore, in my view, the era where you have the large global banks, especially in the consumer space, I think those days are over. And therefore, it's a question of size, right? Even if you are the biggest bank in one country, can you afford to create your own software? So in that context, therefore, on the B2B side, I believe the future for FinTech is very bright. But of course, selling to a bank is a very long cycle, right? And many of the founders and CEOs of startup know that, because there's so many hoops you need to go through to satisfy the bank, because fundamentally banking is about trust. And why it's about trust is because, and I don't know how many of you think about this, probably you don't, because we are well regulated, right? But in a country that's not so well regulated, you think actually your money is not really there. It's been lent out, right? And therefore it's a business of trust. And from that perspective, there's so many things that you need to do to ensure that trust. Because small things, right, like not being able to count correctly someone's balance, that's a question of trust. Not being able to represent a statement correctly, having, of course, some kind of intrusion. All those are fundamental factors that will affect the trust that your customers have. And therefore, I think very importantly, the future for fintechs will continue to be bright, but you have to find a way to get past that long selling cycle. On the B2C side, I think it's much harder. And I'll close my opening comments with this, because today, if you look at banking, right, it's no longer about the place. The place has gone digital. It's no longer about the people. The people have gone or are going to go digital. So you end up with a situation whereby it's not about the product. It hasn't been for a long time. A lot of our innovations, if you frankly look at it, they're all pricing in disguise. Whether you price forward, backward, sideways, right? There hasn't been an innovation for a long time. And therefore, as that trend continues, it becomes even more critical because banking becomes an experience, right? In an experienced company, the company would want to control every single aspect of the customer interaction. And therefore, for the B2C, there's always this issue. Unless you have a situation where the regulation doesn't permit you to operate. And in some countries, that's the case. In Australia and the UK, in the retail space, you cannot sell wealth. And in the wealth space, you can't do retail. And therefore, there is partnership potential between a B2C and a bank. But in a jurisdiction where you can do both and where it becomes an experience, then you really want to control all aspects of the experience. So that partnership becomes very difficult if you do want to control it. We might still be very interested in buying software, but we are not so interested in sharing the experience anymore. Now, I would end by just saying that perhaps an experience company is still very fuzzy. So Apple is not a technology company. Apple is an experience company. Apple focuses on the most minute details. How many of you know what a squircle is in the audience? If you don't know what a squircle is, then you don't know Apple. Because a squircle is that curve on your phone. And Apple spends an enormous amount of time discussing that curve and how that curve should look. And this is the transformation of banking going forward, right? Because in banking today, the 1/3 bottom layer of the bank focuses on such detail. But in experience company, there's a transformation. The top 1/3 of it must now focus on those details. And the banking industry isn't really prepared for this transformation that's coming. So, short question, but long answer. Back to you, Lillian.
Indeed, I agree with what Dennis has covered for us. And in fact, I wanted to say that in Singapore, in fact, last year when I was on a panel like this, and we had all the leaders and the C-series, and the question for the floor was, why are we so slow? How come, Hong Kong could give out their digital license and we haven't? So our book says, right first, fast later. So there we are. We just announced our digital banking license. You see, our Singapore has always had this kiasuism, and that works for us because we want to be very careful. We want to get it right first before we jump. All right. So when you talk about how banks are slowly trying to see how they can work with the innovations, the new ideas. In fact, in this book, we cover how our big boys are trying to put innovations as part of under their wings. But there is also this evolving trend where you see the phoenixes dancing with unicorns. So that's happening and that's possible. So to continue this discussion, we now want to look at how our regulators, our ecosystem, and the individual startup all thrive well in this space. And for a person to discuss this is none other than, shout out here, because he was from MAS, he was with the big boys, he was a startup, and now he has a lot of story to tell. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Lillian. And before I start, sincere congratulations to Dr. Ko and Varun for the launch of the book. And it really aptly puts across the nature of the country we are in, the FinTech Nation. So Singapore has always had this idea of following a certain trend, but then they don't follow it, and we don't follow it in a way that we just get on it first and we build on it. We actually learn a lot from the best of the best in the world. I'll give you an example. So my first role was as a policy analyst at MAS. And one of the things I realized was when we were looking at reviewing the, and this is not something that I'm talking about top secret, it's when we were looking at, modifying or enhancing some of the policies, we would look at other countries as best practices. And this happens across the government in Singapore where, various agencies will look at the best practices in other countries as well. So I saw that in the making. And then, of course, I went on to work for some of the larger FinTech companies, FinTech, as Dr. Ko and Dr. Dennis pointed out earlier, the term has been there, I would say, in a more indirect form for a long while, basically technology for financial institutions. But the term FinTech, of course, it sounds much more, it used to be called IT technology after that, but it was coined, but then it has really stuck in after that. Most importantly, it has allowed everyone to think of it, think of their company's aspirations and goals in a more unified way. So what binds the vendors, what binds these financial services companies together is that goal or the purpose to be able to provide more effective, innovative solutions to the end customers. The preferences of customers drives everything. So be it for a bank, be it for a B2C FinTech, everything is driven by the fact that customers are adopting it. There is lower acquisition costs as you scale. And in the end, you are coming up with an ecosystem that benefits everyone. Digital banking licenses are a great example to that. I think the whole reason why we came up with these licenses is, of course, being able to provide more innovation and the need for the banks to also up their game. Of course, banks have been doing it for many years, and I think they have been very clear that we have been providing these digital channels for all this while. What fintechs have been doing is trying to fill up these gaps, especially the B2C fintechs for all this while. But I think what is evolving now is an ecosystem where the large incumbents work with the relatively newer players in the market to build up solutions which are more integrated, which are providing a much better user experience. In the end, the customer benefits. In the end, the whole ecosystem benefits. So, I mean, having worked for all these organizations, all the way from regulator to large corporates with technology for fintech, for financial institutions, and now for a growing fintech company, which is primarily focusing on B2B solutions to wealth tech, as a wealth tech provider. And Dr. Dennis, I know very well how difficult it is to sell to banks. That's my first-hand experience. It's all sort of converging to a place where it's an ecosystem. So we have, and this book actually comes in at a very good time, where Singapore has already built a track record of having built an ecosystem in the past 5 years to be able to firmly say that we are the FinTech Nation globally. We have organized these really large FinTech festivals in the past. This is the 5th year in the running, and it has actually grown exponentially in terms of attendance and the participation as well. And we are seeing that there is a huge amount of global participation coming in as well. So this book is very timely, and I really congratulate both of you again, and we look forward to working too.
Awesome. I think we all are very, very familiar with the space, but at the same time, we would love different perspectives. Can we straight away now open it up to the floor? I know we had one round of Hall of Fame. This is your second chance. So any one of you want to ask any questions? The panel is here. It's raining outside. Can you hear? It's so loud. Showers of blessing.
Can't go
Yes.
back. You can't go back anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, since we're all stuck,
trapped.
maybe I have the honor to kickstart the process. To the 4 distinguished speakers, and these days, I mean, me as a consultant, yeah, we also talk about ecosystem and stuff like that, right? Partnership seems to be the keywords these days, whether for startups, fintechs, or incumbents. But would like to hear from you the good and bad examples that you have seen in terms of ecosystem that works and ecosystem that somehow have yet to work, and therefore any advice in terms of what does it take to build a effective and sustainable ecosystem?
So one of the key things which we analyzed all through the world in terms of the ecosystems which have been established is like a river. You need to keep refreshing. The difference between a pond and a river is a pond, the water doesn't refresh. The small fish are there, and that's about it. And the water cannot be fresh. The difference between a river is there is constant recycling of resources. For any ecosystem to thrive, There needs to be success and failures at some point of time from the founders, from the companies. And the success, every time there is a company which is successful, there will be an exit, there will be an IPO, which will create 20 new founders from there. So the successful ecosystems are the one which have created those stories, and which is why you hear about a PayPal mafia or a Citrus Pay mafia in India. You already hear about a Gojek mafia and Grab mafia in this part of the world. The mafia is not in the bad sense. It's more of the people who have come off that ecosystem, brought new ideas together. And what is important for Singapore is to create that. We have been fortunate and I would say lucky to an extent to have the first generation of companies. But if you look at the largest exit, the cash exit has been $45 million, which is not enough. We need those companies, the first generation companies, to reach a conclusion. And it could be through an M&A, could be through public markets. There could be different formats of exits, different formats of success. But that needs to happen for the next generation to come in, for this river of innovation, river of resilience to continue and succeed. Otherwise, we'll end up being a pond and not much varieties of flora and fauna flourishes in a pond.
I think the issue goes back to the size of Singapore, and therefore again, whatever you set up, really you have to design it to go global, because we just simply often don't have the scale and the size for the valuation to be, high enough. I would classify it in two ways, right? You have the distribution ecosystems and the manufacturing ecosystem. The manufacturing ecosystem have been around for a long time. If you go back to the days of the PC, the ecosystem was already very clear. You had someone making the chip. You had someone making the ancillary components. There's someone wrote the software, the operating system software. You had the guys who wrote the real software that sat on the operating system. You had the guys that assembled the PC. Then you put it all together. The ecosystem term is as old as that, right? So when many years ago, when I worked in HP, the pre-internet, really just before, we were able to harness it in the form that you can now, right? Ecosystem was already there. So in the manufacturing space, I think there's a lot more promise, because what I see going forward is that in 10 years' time, there will be a lot more cloud-based systems in banks, right? All the new entrants are going that direction. It is now probably in the past 2 years, 3 years, finally possible for you to host everything cloud native. And in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, I think everybody will go this way. And therefore, it will create a manufacturing ecosystem that allows it to thrive significantly globally. And one of the problems in the manufacturing of banking software is that it has always been very niche. There has never been an SAP of banking. So when you go to any regional bank and you take a look at the back, it's a spaghetti of solutions in a non-standard way, right? And therefore, that's why it's so terrible. That's why the CIOs have such a big problem, right? On the other hand, the distribution piece, right, is something that's much newer. And if you look at the examples from China, they are almost always distribution ecosystems, right? It's a marketplace where you are trying to connect buyers and sellers, people who want loans to people who are giving loans, people want to buy stuff to people who make stuff, right? And this is what the internet has made possible through the distribution of information in terms of who want to buy and who want to sell. I think that area is much harder for Singapore because, again, it's the size limitation that makes it very difficult. And therefore, if you calculate the potential size of the market, you often find that you cannot make a profit. You cannot get to the scale. And I think the issues in Southeast Asia are more that in Southeast Asia, you don't have countries at the same level. You have the countries that have the population. And if you look at consumer banking, it will always be about demographics, right? But they're not at the right stage of evolution for some of the distribution that you might find is useful in Singapore. They might have other kind of distribution that they need in their stage of development, right? And so I think this is how I would look at it. It's a fairly complicated scene, but the basis of it is how do you break out of Singapore's size?
Hey, hi. I have a question
Yes, Shankar.
for Varun. You articulated exits earlier. So my question is to create an environment of scale and startups here, you need exits. I agree with you. Now, my question was, do you think the local banks and local large entities have a potential or are interested in buying local companies? That's when the momentum of startups will build up. The expectation is always a foreign entity coming into Singapore and buying local startups.
Short answer is no, because the companies which are there. So, for example, I'll split into two. For the B2B companies which are here, it is not worth buying for a financial institution here, because a B2B company which is built, that is supposed to serve a lot of different places, a lot of different banks or insurers or asset managers all over the world. If a bank does it, he's the only one which is going to use. So which is why for banks, if it's a B2B company, it makes sense to acquire at an early stage. When it is a sub 50 million valuation range, they can still make a business case internally for taking the team and then they're leapfrogging. If the company, because the challenge, what happens is, so I usually say this for the startups, the valuation, your valuation will not let you get a cash exit, and your burn rate will make it tougher to live. So which is why for the B2B companies, the players will be larger tech players. To exit to a larger tech player is much easier. To sell to an PE company will be much easier. To sell to an existing incumbent financial institution as a tech player will be feasible, but only to a certain extent. At least in this part of the world. So that's what I would say for the B2B. For the B2C, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to interject there. See, that's a counter argument to growth, right? Effectively, then you don't start a startup in Singapore, you start somewhere else. Does it make a point? So, I mean, I'm just being very rhetoric, right? I've started 4 companies in Singapore, and I believe to grow a community of a phenomenon like what you mentioned, PayPal Mafia, you need a lot of exits. And the exits are far and few right now at this point in time, but there's a lot of companies which are doing pretty well in Singapore, and their market is predominantly outside of Singapore. The reason I pose specific question for banks to look at Singapore startup with technology and go out into the market outside is what my question was, more towards building the ecosystem of growth of startups in Singapore.
Thank you for the clarification. The challenge usually is, it is not the KPI of a lot of people at the bank to go after something like that, because the overseas branches will have their own P&Ls and stuff. So it's not that easy in the existing banking KPI system. Which part of the bank is going to fund that deal, and the fruits will come in very different parts of the bank. So it's how the banking structure is in terms of who's going to pay for it and where is the revenue is going to sit.
So I have a follow-on question to that.
Yes, please.
It's just having a debate, right? And especially that Dennis is sitting across. You wore a banking hat as well. What I'm looking forward is, in terms of the valuation metrics won't meet because it's a small and smaller companies exist here. What I'm looking at is, today banks are evolving into a technology company. Right? So effectively, a technology company to grow, they usually grow by acquisition and consolidating multiple knowledge base to grow. So the banks would have to start thinking otherwise and looking at how to become a technology company, because they are being confronted with a lot of the technology companies who are becoming banks. It was a statement.
Well, this goes back to the fundamental thesis, right, of what a bank is. So I don't think a bank is a technology company. Banks used to be product companies, and now they're experience companies. They're struggling to become experience companies. I find nothing in technology in a bank that's really unique. The difficulties we have are because of the myriad solutions. You've got a solution for deposit, you've got a solution for insurance, you've got a solution for unit trust, you've got a solution for mortgage, you've got a solution for credit cards, a solution for debit cards, you've got a solution for core banking. Then you've got customer ID capability, right? Because you've got a link back. Then you've got credit systems. You get a spaghetti of solution, right? And so far, it has been very difficult because that's the way they've migrated, right? And you don't have many recent banks that can use the latest. And it will evolve there. But I'm more with Arun that, you know, it will evolve because there's an ecosystem of what Shadib used to call the software company, the IT company. They've always been there. They've got a new term now, right? And with the standardization of a lot of the APIs, right, it will foster a lot more collaboration. But fundamentally, this goes back to the argument, right? Are banks technology companies? Let's take a poll of the panel here, right? So, who's in favor of bank as technology company? Anyone?
Frankly, I thought it's an inevitable thing, right? They have to coexist happily ever after. That's the new normal.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to coexist. Look at what Stripe has done recently, right? They've just upped the ante, right? They made the API so simple, and they're working with the banks right now. So effectively, the banks are going to have the pressure from the technology companies, and they have to evolve, and they have to become better and better what they do. You know, their modes are going to go away.
Yes,
slowly,
I agree
right?
with you. That it's a matter of priority. It's a matter of how we do it. Read this book. We have a chapter just on that. All right. And thanks to Umang for pushing it so hard into this book, as well as our DBS, our dear Kui Juan is another one who goes on and on and on this. And frankly, I think we could talk on this for 40 days, 40 nights. But I am so sorry. This is a wonderful discussion, but I have to bring it to an end. Okay? So we will take a group picture, the four of us on the stage. And after that, we want all of you to come and join us for a group picture. And this is broadcast live to anyone who is joining us in SFF. Over to you, Merv.
Thank you, Dr. Koh. Thank you, panel. Big round of applause for the panel, everybody. At this point in time, we're going to take a photograph of the panel, only the panelists. So our photographer, there you go. Okay, get the directions from the photographer. Remain standing, please. There you go. You want them to follow or don't follow? Thank you. And there's one more from her. You want to take one of the panel or yours is the audience? Okay, so, right. So panelists, thank you so much. We would like to invite you down. And then you're going to face the stage because our photographer here will take a group photo with everyone in the background. Yeah, you could do that. And we'd like everyone to stand as well. Thank you so much, so that we have everyone in the audience and then we can capture the moment. All right, so our photographer will be on stage. Well, it looks like we have more photographers and videographers as well. No, we will do the Wi-Fi kind of thing here. All right, nearer to the seats, you can raise your hands. All right, you can give a loud cheer. This is photo time. Nice big smile, everybody, on a Monday rainy evening. Thank you very much. And this is the Singapore, the FinTech Nation, the launch. Thank you. All right, and We're going to do a video as well. Okay, we got the count of 3. You can just shout, happy reading. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Happy reading. Yippee. Yippee-ki-yay.
This is
Wing,
Dante
wing, there we
Disparte,
go.
Vice Chairman of.
Thank you very much. There you go. Actually, they take more when you're more natural, without posing. They tend to take that more. All right.
I'd like to
Thank you very
congratulate
much,
the
panel. Thank you, everybody. Now, I'm going to let the photographers come down. Just a few more things before I let you all off. But first and foremost, thank you so much, everybody, for taking time off your busy schedule to be here with us this afternoon. And we just want to say that we want to find out a little bit more about finance and technology. Then, in the words of Dr. Ko, go and get the book lah. All right, so please get a book. We do bulk orders as well, Christmas corporate gifts. All right, go and do that. Our friends are out there taking orders, so have a word with them. And from our friends from Bridge Plus, they also like to share this moment because this is a brand new building. Yeah, if you'd like to take a tour, all right, just have a look and see what other things that you could do in this fantastic space. By all means, have a chat with Marcus or Eugene. Eugene's over here. He will conduct a private tour. All right, so by all means, other than that, please, thank you so much, everybody, for making your way down. And yeah, it is the end of a Monday evening. Relax, chill out, let your hair down, and go and drink and be merry. My name is Melvin. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.